Guys, welcome back to Planet Mithril, and we are finally getting around now to giving you our review and rundown of the Middle-earth Grand Tournament 2022. So yes, admittedly we are a little bit late to the party on this one. When the event wound down, we had a lot to do between then and now with work and videos and other bits and bobs, but we are finally getting around to giving you our review and roundup of the GT 2022 and all the shenanigans that transpired across the course of the weekend. Firstly, I mean, it goes without saying once again that the Middle-earth community is without a doubt the best gaming community I could ever hope to be involved with, and I'm so grateful for everybody over the course of my 20-year plus tenure that I've had the privilege of meeting and chatting with and rolling dice with, and these events just serve to show just how strong and rock solid that community is. You can literally rock up there and talk to anybody, and it's absolutely phenomenal. The community is so welcoming, so engaging, so lovely, and everyone's just there to support each other. So again, I feel like as we did with the Throne of Skulls one, I just have to highlight that even if I come away from an event like this with no wins, and I'm never there personally myself to try and win anything. If I win some games, happy days, you know. But just the sheer fact that you get to go up there and meet like-minded people again, see some old friends, meet some new friends, and just see everyone again is absolutely incredible. So thank you everybody who was there first and foremost over the weekend, who gave me, my gaming partners, and my missus who came up for the weekend as well, such a warm welcome, and which made the weekend so amazing for us. So thank you everybody who was in attendance straight off the bat. So GT works a little bit differently to Throne of Skulls. Instead of 5 games with 1,000 point army, you take up 2 700 point armies, one for good, one for evil, and you will play 3 games with each across the course of the weekend. Now we had a little bit of a dilemma when it came to our armies. Our original intention was to do the front gate of Minas Tirith with the Mordor forces breaking their way into the Gondorian stronghold, and have Gandalf and a host of Minas Tirith behind the gate ready to repel them, and that would have worked as a nice kind of scenic ball. Unfortunately, by the time we got around to starting to paint our Mordor force, there was not a lot of time left. In the interest of not driving myself round the bend, we decided to have a fallback and swap out the Mordor army for an Isengard army. So our 2 forces were Minas Tirith, led by Gandalf, and our evil army was the Legendary Legion Assault on Helm's Deep, and we were able to make a really cool little display board which kind of acted like bookends. So we had one side with the Gondor side, one side with the Isengard side. As you can see, this is our board here, and we've got the central demarcation line separating the 2 boards by a 50-50 split of a Minas Tirith wall and a Helm's Deep wall respectively. So in the end it worked out okay, and it meant that we could actually get some sleep before the event. We weren't up till 3 AM painting, and all 3 of us managed to get all of our stuff painted before the event, so we all managed to get some sleep. That never happens. So yes, our armies were as follows. For the good side, we had Gandalf the White mounted on Shadowfax. He was accompanied by 5 warriors of Minas Tirith with shield, 5 warriors of Minas Tirith with spear and shield, a Minas Tirith banner bearer, and 4 Citadel Guard. Warband number 2 was Hurin the Tall, also mounted on a horse, because we had a few extra points to spare, and by happenstance we had 1 painted up already, so we took him on a horse. He again was accompanied by 5 Minas Tirith warriors with shield, 5 with spear and shield, 5 Citadel Guard with longbows. And then we had probably my most favourite model in the Gondor army list, a Gondor Battlecry Trebuchet, because I have never run trebuchets or siege engines at an event before, and I thought this would be a great time to do it. So this is the list we ran for our good army. And our evil army list comprised of the Uruk-hai leader with a shield. He was accompanied by 5 Uruk berserkers, 3 Uruk warriors with shield, 6 pikemen, and a banner bearer. And then we had 2 identical warbands. We had 2 captains, each with a shield, each accompanied by 4 warriors with shield and 8 pikemen. So we were really utilising those pike blocks. And our final warband was an Isengard Assault Ballista, because again, we haven't run one of these before, and the Isengard army bonus, as it turns out from the games, makes them pretty good. So I'm definitely not going to be buying more of those for a future Isengard project. So yes, we're about to go into a brief rundown of all the games we had over the weekend. And again, just want to say a massive thank you to all my opponents over the weekend. I had 6 of the best games of Middle-earth I could have possibly hoped for over the weekend. So thank you all so much, and thank you all again for allowing us to take pictures and short videos to feature in this video. Everyone had such lovely looking armies and models at this event. Everyone should be super proud of what they brought up to the event and what they put on the table. It was a great pleasure to go around and see everyone's armies either in battle or on the tray and just admire what everyone's been working on. Yeah, everyone's armies were absolutely stunning, and again, thank you for allowing me the privilege of showing off a handful of them in this video to you guys. So without further ado, let's get into game 1. So, what does a brutish horde of Mordor orcs, led by some of the most fearsome commanders you can want, look like on the tabletop? Well, funnily enough, it looks like our first opponent of the weekend, Chris Gross's army, which he pit against us in the first scenario of the weekend, which was Contest of Champions, which pit Gandalf versus the Witch King in an epic fight, just like it was in the films. Not quite like it was in the films. It went a little bit different compared to how it went in the films, but we'll touch on that in a minute. And not to spoil anything for you, but they very much continued their trend of perfecting the art of falling over in front of stiff breezes and Mordor orcs. And as you can see here from the pictures, obviously the leader of the army was the Witch King mounted on horse. We had Goroth, we had Kardash, who was immolating Gondorians left, right and centre. From memory, I can't tell from the pictures now, but I think Zagdash was in there as well. And we just had a host of Morannon and Mordor orcs. There's something to be said for having a really solid group block of orcs on the tabletop. There's something really quite satisfying about it. I'm not quite sure what it is, but the army looked fantastic and worked really, really well on the tabletop. And Chris, you played an amazing game. Made me think about every single decision I was making. And it was a tough one to start the weekend off. You made me think. I don't like thinking at the best of times. And you made me think on game 1 on the Saturday. No, it was an absolutely phenomenal game, absolutely phenomenal. It ended up being a bit of a war of attrition, so Gandalf and the Witch King, obviously, for contest champions, have to set up within 3 inches of the centre. Their warbands can then deploy 6 inches around from them, so we had Gandalf and his very small host of Gondorians set up in a little bit of a shield wall to protect him from the sides. And I think, from memory, the Witch King set up at the back of his 3-inch bubble and some orcs went in front. I could be wrong. But either way, there was magic being hurled at each other from turn 1. Gandalf, who had his staff broken very, very early doors and lost a significant chunk of will due to sap will. Maybe not the most tactically sound decision on my part, letting that slide. But my thinking was, if I'm going to throw more will after not losing the staff and trying to resist the sap will, I may as well let it go through and use the will I've got left to do what I want to do. In the moment, it seemed like it was a tactfully sound decision, but looking back on it, unlimited will's better than no will. I never claimed to be competitive. And there's a little bit of me that was a bit like, this is how it was in the films. Gandalf's staff got shattered, the Witch King. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen regardless. So why not just let it be? Let's channel the films in through our games. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. The Witch King was very nearly banished in response. I think we drained a good couple of fate points off of him. Obviously he's only got the 1 wound, so trying to score points for just wounding the leader is difficult. It's very much an all or nothing scenario when you're playing Contest of Champions against the Witch King or any of the other ring wraiths. You either get all the points for killing him or none of the points, because you can't wound him, because if you wound him he's dead. And then there was just a massive big long battle line. I think it spanned across pretty much like the centre tile and half again of the rest of the board, just a orc block meets Gondorian block. And there was a significant amount more Mordor orcs to Gondorians, so trying to hold that back wasn't the easiest thing in the world. As I say, Kardash was doing very well. He was immolating Gondorians left, right and centre and doing his best to regain those will points and go and support Mordor orcs where he needed to be. Hurin did quite well. He's carved his way through quite a few of the orcs on the left-hand flank. Unfortunately, the Gondorians around him weren't so lucky, and it ended up being him versus a whole horde, which ultimately was his downfall. Eventually, Gandalf did sadly succumb to just the sheer weight of orcs and number of attacks on him. The Trebuchet did quite well. The Trebuchet got quite a few good kills. It was quite awkward to try and position because of the way the battle lines were. So we had like orc block, Gondorian block, and they were in combat from like, oh, this is tactical visuals. This is what we need, visuals. This is your visual. But it was quite difficult to try and pick correct targets which would minimise the threat to the Gondorian lines, because they can still get hit by the 2-inch radius of the trebuchet shot. And a strength 5 hit against the defense 6 Gondorian is still going to kill on 5s. And the outnumber bonus from the Mordor army bonus really helped. I didn't really want to risk making that separation between the numbers too much. But the targets I did get were fairly solid. Unfortunately, it was a loss to Gondor to start us off on the Saturday. But Chris, mate, my friend, it was an absolute pleasure to play against you. Thank you so much for the game. I really, really hope and look forward to getting the chance to roll dice with you again sometime soon, because it was just such a fun game, so full of laughs. And Gondor's coming back. Gondor's coming back at Mordor. Don't you worry about that. The White City will not fall just yet. The White Wizard did, but the White City will not fall. But yeah, no, seriously, thank you so much for starting the weekend off with an absolute bang, a thoroughly enjoyable game, and an absolutely lovely gentleman to play the first game against. Chris, thank you so much. Your army looks fantastic, and I very much look forward to rolling dice with you again in the future. So game 2 saw Isengard's first foray into combat over the weekend, and they were pitted against Ben Harbour's absolutely lovely looking Gondor army in Destroy the Supplies. Now, as somebody who's played an awful lot of Gondor myself, I've never actually really played that many games against Gondor, at least not for a good few years. So it's very different knowing what they do when you're playing with them, but knowing what they do when you're playing against them comes up there. Well, it might just be me, but caught me off guard a little bit. But Ben's army consisted of I think it was a king of men on horseback, the one, the only, the never shall be usurped Gerald Lovelylocks, who was a constant thorn in Isengard's side throughout the entire game. We had a handful of knights, we had Citadel Guard, we had captains, we had a Knight of the White Tower, and we also had a Gondor Battlecry Trebuchet. I have never once played a game against the Gondor Battlecry Trebuchet, and now I feel a little bit bad for using it against all the people I've used it against up until now, because I know exactly how devastating it can be, and I've never once been on the receiving end of it. So I got a taste of my own medicine during this game, let's just say that. But Sir Lovelylocks and the knights gallantly rode forward into the Isengard lines. We had 2 very distinct pike blocks over on the left-hand side, and one worked its way out the right-hand side, facing down the trebuchet and a warband of Gondorians that are deployed over there to try and capture the far right supply marker. For those who don't know how Destroy the Supplies work, you have to have a model in base contact with a supply marker on the other side of the board that hasn't shot, been engaged in combat, or casting magical powers, and then you can remove that supply and score some points. The Gondorian cavalry, however, after a few turns did start falling fairly quickly. I think just the sheer weight of numbers from the Uruk-hai pike blocks and the berserkers proved a little bit too much for them, and they fell. However, Gerald Lovelylocks, Lord Sir King Lovelylocks, the indomitable, for about 3, 4, 5 turns, he had at least 10 to 12 attacks worth of Uruk-hai on him, and I don't know what happened. Maybe they brought LARPing swords to the fight at this point. They decided they didn't want their actual steel and got out the rubber ones. Because on the rare occasion that the Uruks could actually win the fight, bear in mind, I don't think he had any might points at this point either, but he's a king of men, so he's fight value 6. So just rolling that 6, he's beating off all these Uruk-hai. They just couldn't wound him. Could not kill Gerald Lovelylocks. Undoubtedly the MVP of the game. For Ben here, in my opinion. He just would not die. And I think for a good 3-4 turns, he held up a significant portion of Uruk-hai warriors just through the 3 to 4 turns that we were trying to get leader points and try and bludgeon Sir Lovelylocks into the ground with the rest of the Gondorian knights. But he wouldn't have it. Wouldn't have it. So, you know, fair play, Gerald. As we said, we got to experience what damage a trebuchet can do. And unfortunately, we did end up getting a direct hit from a trebuchet on the captain and 12 Uruk-hai who are on the far right-hand flank, who, to be fair, not a lot of them fell from the initial hit, but once they fell, they were on the floor trapped. The Gondorian warband that was far enough away that they couldn't be scattered onto, but also close enough that they could then mob on if the priority went Ben's way, which of course it did. A lot of Uruk-hai in that flank fell. By the time we finished the fight on that side, I think it was the captain and 1 warrior who was still alive at the end of the game. I don't know how. I have no idea how. but the captain did manage to fight his way off the floor and plough through a significant amount of Gondorians that came into the counter charge. If I have to nominate a MVP, my end for this game, it would definitely be the Uruk Siege Ballista. Why I have never played these before, I couldn't tell you. The special rules they get with the Legendary Legion Assault and Helm's Deep bonus, with the rerolls to hit and the rerolls to scatter, make them so much more potent and so much more of a threat. So we had it parked between, we had 2 objective markers, we had it parked in here, and it was quite effectively managing to fire off and pick off the odd Gondorian stragglers who are trying to make their way to the objectives. Thankfully there weren't too many that it couldn't deal with them. Occasionally it was able to throw one into another one and knock them both back. But for a good 3-4 turns, it managed to single-handedly hold off all the Gondorians from getting into those supply markers. And on the last turn of the game, one heroic Gondor captain, he leapt the fence on a 6. He ran to the supply marker. He sat there, hunched down behind his shield. The Uruk Siege Ballista hit, got past the wall for the in the way test for the little paddock he was in. Didn't scatter, got a direct hit and sent him flying off the supply marker, killing him outright, and thus I think actually probably preventing Uruks from getting a loss on this game, because if that supply had been removed by that very brave Gondorian captain, then it might well have been a different game. So MVP for me goes to the Siege Ballista, and that continues to be a thing all weekend. This is not, it hasn't peaked yet. Trust me, there's a story to come with the Uruk Siege Ballista. And this did actually end in a win for Isengard. Hooray! Win number 1. At this point, I'd already exceeded my expectations and hopes for the weekend. But again, I mean, you're going to hear this for every single game across this weekend, because they all were absolutely phenomenal. But Ben, thank you so much. Another opponent I've not had the pleasure of playing before, but very much hope to have the pleasure of playing again. Your army looked brilliant. I love the blue and the white, which complemented really well with all the Gondorian aesthetics. Your army looked phenomenal. Thank you so much for a brilliant game too. So game 3 was Isengard's second foray into the fight this weekend against our lovely opponent Chris Webster in the scenario breakthrough. Chris won the roll-off and he opted to take his good side, which consisted of King LSR mounted on his horse, a handful of Minister of Knights, the King of the Dead and his heralds, and a slew of Warriors of the Dead. A very hard-hitting army, a very tough army to put down, and able to apply pressure where needed to really get those important plays through. I looked at this and I looked at my poor, humble, groggy Urukai with nothing more than captains to lead them, and I must admit, it wasn't looking too good for Isengard. The board we were on had lots of very defined firing lines. It was a little bit of a cityscape map, lots of modular buildings placed in a like crisscross fashion, so we could very like city fight-esque. It worked out quite well for the ballista, as I didn't have to really worry too much about positioning, because wherever it was going to be, it was going to have a shot at something, whether that's going to be in the way or result in hitting some of my own dues to do it. But there was very few times it didn't have something to shoot at. Aragorn, LSR, the powerhouse that is the King of Gondor, as much of a pain as he can be, and he's certainly capable of cleaving through many an Uruk and Orc head with Anduril at his side. We had Aragorn and the knights deploying on one end of the street, and we put the leader's warband facing down, so we had the berserkers and the main bulk of the Urukai there. I think turn 1, 2 berserkers charged into Aragorn and locked him down before he got the cavalry charge off. I was expecting these berserkers to die. It was an acceptable loss, but I thought, on the off chance, you never know, they might be able to pop a couple of wounds off. Needless to say, I didn't have to be so worried, because Aragorn's very first turn of the combat, he rolled 3 1s to win. And I felt heartbroken on poor Chris's behalf, because I've been in that situation and it's never fun. I only wish I'd put a few more berserkers in there. As a result of that, we managed to take a couple of wounds off Aragorn, and he burnt through 1 if not 2 of his fate, which was incredible. But we'd managed to turn 1, take a significant chunk out of the resources of LSR, which on the face of it probably doesn't make that much of a difference at that stage of the game, but it definitely seemed to revitalise the Uruks a little bit, and they were able to push back against the cavalry until eventually it was only Aragorn, I think, left standing against the few Uruks that were left. We also ended up with a new term for berserkers during this game. Oily boys. Oily boys. Yeah. Yeah, that was a thing. The King of the Dead did what the King of the Dead will do and just ploughed his way through Uruks. The Army of the Dead is a very good army to take against quite a lot of the evil armies, as every single model causes terror, and with an average courage of 3 across most evil armies, you're not always going to guarantee getting those charges in. And if you're not very careful with how you position your models and how you direct your charges in, if you fail any of these courage tests to get in, then you can quite easily screw yourself up in regard to other moves you want to make, because once that model fails a courage test, it can no longer move. And that happened a couple of times. You know, once you get into combat, they're defense 7, King of the Dead's defense 8, so they're not even that easy to shift once you get in there. And if they win the fight, they're wounding you on your courage, which, as we've just said, isn't great anyway. So they're killing you on 3s, 4s. So the King of the Dead carried on doing what the King of the Dead does and just ploughed through Uruks. The Riders went down fairly quickly. I was keen to get them off the board because the last thing I want is more cavalry coming in from a different side. And then with the courage test shenanigans, giving them the free reign to go wherever they wanted, really. So I did try and prioritise those, which worked to my advantage. And then it was a fairly even exchange of Uruks and Army of the Dead dying. Well, Army of the Dead dying again. I remember at one point struggling for targets with the ballista. I don't know if it was a deliberate thing, but we did end up firing a shot into back one of my captains and launching him through a line of Uruks and Army of the Dead alike, which, if nothing else, was fun. We went Uruk golfing with a captain, which was quite enjoyable. And this is where I was saying the ballista hadn't peaked in the last game. This is where it peaked. We're down to the last turn. Aragorn, I think, has lost his horse. He's on foot. I can't remember. He might have even had his horse. It was a little while ago now. And he's on the flanks. He's on the left still, cleaving through Urukai. The ballista had a clean shot to the combat, so it rolls to hit. It gets through. It doesn't scatter. It gets a direct hit on Aragorn. Doesn't randomise onto any of the other guys in the combat. Wounds Aragorn, sends him 6 inches up the board, takes his last wound off him, and poor Chris rolled, I think it was a 1 or a 2 for his last fate roll after the Berserker incident at the beginning, and he only had the 1 3-pointer might at that point. I don't even remember if he'd used it or not by that point, but he failed the fate roll and Aragorn went down to a siege ballista. In 2 games, this siege ballista has earned over, 4 or 5 times its cost in kills, but it did end up being another win to Isengard, which puts Isengard at 2 wins and Gondor, unfortunately, on 0 wins. But yeah, Chris, thank you so much for an absolutely amazing game 3. It was so much fun, and I genuinely felt so bad about that Aragorn thing, but it was an absolute pleasure to get to know you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us during the rest of the weekend, getting to know you over some beers in the pub quiz, and just having some laughs and some shenanigans. I really, really hope we get to play again sometime soon, either outside of the tournament or at another event. Chris, thank you so much for an amazing Game 3. This is where I feel a bit of a pauper among kings for our Game 4 scenario. It was Gondor's second outing, and we were playing the first time I've ever had the chance to play this model, but we were playing against Matt King and his gorgeously painted Smaug, Desolator of the North. I've still got my one. I know I said I painted for the channel. It's still in the box. I need to really start that. I did promise. One day it will happen. One day. But yes, the scenario was Fog of War, and Matt, your Smaug was incredible. It was on a scenic base. We had all the gold pouring down over the halls of Erebor, all the columns, and he fit really snugly into the base. It looked incredible. We even had a little Bilbo somewhere on the display board as well. It's an absolutely stunning model, and massive kudos to anybody who can paint that and paint it so that it looks really good. And this was a phenomenal job on this absolutely spectacular piece, Matt. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to play against it, and honestly take a little bit of the sting out of him as well, because Smaug's always been one of those models where I've kind of thought, well, someone puts that down on the table, but it's basically game over because he's not exactly easy to kill. It was a little bit of a wake-up call for that, actually, because it wasn't as much of a, not that it wasn't a challenge, but it wasn't as devastating as I was expecting. He was still incredible, don't get me wrong. He still did exactly what you'd expect Smaug to do. but it didn't feel like it was completely one-sided, because it absolutely wasn't. It was strangely a lot more back and forth than I actually thought a game against Smaug, especially with normal Gondorians on foot, than a game against Smaug could have been. But yes, the scenario was Fog of War, so that is where you have to pick a hero to keep alive in your army, cannot be your general. You have to pick a hero to kill in the enemy army, and you had to pick a piece of terrain for a nominated hero to stay alive in at the end of the game. There wasn't a lot of fog on Smaug's side, as it is the only model that's in the Desolator of the North list. It doesn't really leave a lot of ambiguity in regard to who you've got to kill, who you've got to keep alive. A terrain piece big enough for Smaug to fit in. Watching Smaug trying to crawl around this little tiny square paddock, which was the only real viable bit of terrain that I think Matt had available to him from deployment, was quite amusing. Just picture one of our cats who, when they get into a really small hole, and they just turn themselves into a liquid and just kind of fill every bit of the area. That's how I pictured Smaug trying to fit in his little farmyard paddock. But this was a really fun game, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how Smaug works and how. So for me, playing against big monsters, even to a degree, things like trolls, I tend to shy away from dealing with them because they hurt, and I know that I can apply pressure elsewhere, thus leaving the big monsters free to do what they used to do. I didn't have that option in this game. I only had the option of kill Smaug, deal with Smaug. So we tried to deal with Smaug. And it's taken quite a lot of the sting out of some of the bigger monsters for me. Not that I ever felt threatened by them, but they're big, intimidating pieces, and you don't want to risk losing models when you don't have to. So you tend to either try and slow them down or stop them from doing what they want to do rather than actually dealing with them. I feel like I did kind of force Matt's hand a little bit from turn one, as the trebuchet, when it hit Smaug, it took 10 wounds off Smaug at turn one, and that did kind of force Matt's hand a little bit to just plough him straight in. Another turn, there was potential for the game to be over on turn two if the trebuchet had got a second hit off and taken the last 10 wounds off of Smaug, which is something I never knew was a thing. But yeah, turn one, 10 wounds off Smaug. I'm like, yes, he's half dead. But obviously that was only going to last for as long as Matt gets him out of combat, and he didn't stay out of combat for very long after that. Hurin did absolutely nothing during the game. I mean, he did score me my points. He was my nominated hero to stand in a forest on Matt's half of the table. I think in one turn, Smaug managed to barge. I think it was a barge, and I had about 13 Gondorians around him at one point, with Citadel Guard and various supports and whatnot. And I think in one turn he killed 11 of them, which was a huge blow to Gondor. Once Smaug eventually used up all his might points, the Gondorians were very fortunate, and they did manage to bring him down a further 7 wounds. So by the end of the game, we managed to take 17 wounds off of Smaug, which is so many more than I thought I was going to do. I didn't even know about the trebuchet 10 wound thing until the beginning of the game, and Matt very kindly explained that's how that worked. Just couldn't quite push it all the way, but I'm happy with 17. We got him down to nearly dead, and that was mainly through combat after the trebuchet hit, which was impressive for bog standard Gondorians. That's no mean feat. But the game ended as a draw, which was, I think, as shocking to Matt as it was to me. And I think the only thing that caused it to end on a draw was one lowly Gondorian, right at the end of the game, got off his feet because he was on the floor for some reason. I think there was a barge and he hadn't died. No, he failed to jump over the fence the previous turn, so he'd failed to jump back into the paddock to take on Smaug, and was lying on the floor, just kind of on his back. Help me. He managed to jump over the fence back into the paddock to contest the terrain piece with Smaug, which I think was what ultimately put it to a draw right at the end, right at the 11th hour. I mean, we've had some close games this weekend, and there's been all the shenanigans happening on last turn, but that was the most shenanigan-y Gondorian. But yeah, so the game did end to a draw between Gondor and the Desolator of the North. And, you know, it wasn't a loss for Gondor, which I'm happy with. And Matt, thank you again for an amazing Game 4. Your Smaug looked phenomenal. I cannot praise you enough for how much of a good job you've done on that model. Your base looked incredible. It really fit in with theme, and I'm only sorry that you had the issues of having to move the dragon off the base all the time to try and maneuver the base around the board without him falling on things or falling off and breaking himself. But no, your Smaug looked incredible. Your base was amazing, and thank you for a phenomenal 4th game. I very much look forward to rolling dice with you again sometime in the future. So at this point we've had 2 evil games and 2 good games, and Gondor unfortunately completely fluffed their first fight into a fully ranked and powered up group of Mordor and Morannon orcs. So what can we do? We give them their redemption. They get a chance to go at them again, different opponent, different army list. They get to run into the ranks of Mordor again and prove their valiant worth and redeem themselves in the eyes of the White Tower, and promptly all die. Our 5th game was against Neil McLaughlin in the scenario Hold Ground. Neil's army had a really lovely mix of mainly Mordor and Black Númenóreans, orcs, and a couple of the orc heroes there, allied in with Suladan and a handful of Serpent Riders for that very quick, mobile harassment, get in, punch something, kill it, and move on to the next one little unit, which worked really effectively. And an absolutely stunning conversion for the Witch King of Angmar on Fell Beast on a freestanding piece of Minas Morgul wall with the green light coming up the front, and it looked so cool on the tabletop. That's an absolutely gorgeous model. I've been dying to convert a Ringwraith on Fell Beast. I do not have the bottle to do it. I'm not a sculptor, but that was absolutely phenomenal. Really lovely oranges and blacks through the Black Númenóreans that really made them stand out and made them feel a bit more unique to the usual just greys and metals that you usually get. And we had the Shadow Lord as well in there as a second mobile magic piece to harass various Gondorian units. So we didn't have 1 Ringwraith, we had 2 Ringwraiths. We had double the trouble. So Gandalf did manage to almost pop the Witch King turn 1 again with a banish. Drained a good few fate points off of him, and I think really put the pressure on Neil very early doors. Well, I mean, Gandalf has had his 2nd run at the Witch King, and it's gone the same way as the first, unfortunately. He then ran, after trying to banish the Witch King, he ran into combat with a couple of orcs and promptly got swamped once again. I mean, Gandalf, maybe I'm just not a magic user. Maybe I should stick to Denethor as my leader. I seem to do better with Denethor. And at least when he dies, it's only 35 points as opposed to 220 odd. Yeah, so Hold Ground features a central objective, and you are deploying via the Maelstrom deployment rules, which mean you randomise for a table edge for each warband to come on. They could arrive from any table edge. There's no real guarantee where they're going to arrive, but you can influence these rolls with might. The Trebuchet deployed on my side because I wasn't going to walk around the other side of the table because I'm large and lazy. So he deployed in front of me, and then it became a little bit of a chess match in regard to where other bits of the armies were going to deploy. I think Suladan and the Serpent Riders managed to come on more or less next to the Trebuchet, with enough flak that they could get in next turn but not be charged, but also stay within the Trebuchet's limit of volley fire. And then Húrin and his warband came on just in front of the Serpent Guard to block off the Trebuchet. I think Neil rolled quite badly for the first roll of reinforcements. The Witch King wasn't on turn 1, I know that much. But in the end, we had a 6x4 table, and we played on about that much of the table. Everything was in this one little bit of table, which was a lot to deal with. There was chaos everywhere. Orcs and Gondorians absolutely everywhere. Gondor just couldn't kill orcs. They couldn't kill orcs. Again, we've got the issue with the terror on the Black Númenóreans. Even with the +1 courage, I think they burnt all their bravery fighting Smaug in the previous game, because we either weren't getting the combats in when we needed them, or we just couldn't get the hits through. And wounding on 6s, it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't happening with the Gondorians versus the Black Númenóreans. And I think that's where my only main gripe with Gondor really is a lack of strength 4. The fight value is fine. Like, I don't expect them to all be fight value 4. We've got Citadel Guard, we've got Fountain Court Guard, we've got bits and bobs that are fight 4, so you can tie and win a fight. But it's the strength 3. Just give us some things that are strength 4 that aren't just limited to heroes. That's where my only gripe with Gondor is. I mean, I love them. They're near and dear to my heart. They are my favourite army. They will always be my favourite army. Give us that little bit of extra hitty power, just so we can stand up to some of the bigger defence units. But that's my only gripe. And, like, against anything defence 5 or lower, we're winning on 5s. But it's just, against Uruks, against Black Númenóreans, against anything defence 6, we're winning on 6s. And it wasn't, unfortunately, happening for Gondor in this game today. They did not get their redemption from the first smashing by Mordor on the Saturday, and instead crumbled under the might of the Mordor swords. All this chaos was going on around them. The Witch King and Gandalf engaged in epic magic duels, Gondorians fighting for their lives, Húrin and Cúladain carving their way for whatever they could get hold of. There was one combat that really, really mattered. It was a combat for the ages. One siege engine crew and one Black Númenórean. That was, I think, the only real fight that Neil and I were super invested in, because these two guys were in combat from about turn 3 all the way through to about turn 8 or 9, constantly just slapping each other in the face. Neither one of them could kill the other. It was a glorious battle for the ages, but unfortunately it did end up resulting in the siege crew dying. Ironically, again, on the very last turn of the game. So unfortunately, the battle for the ages was lost by Gondor, and all valor left the White City. It's not a combination of a list I've come up against before, so I was really grateful to have the chance to play against it. I've never really personally rated Black Númenóreans myself, but having seen them used on a tabletop and used well by somebody who knows what they're doing and can use them efficiently, as Neil did during this game, it's altered my perception on them. So I'm interested in giving those a go as and when I get around to doing some sort of evil army, some sort of Mordor force sometime in the future. But unfortunately, this did end in a loss for Gondor, their second loss out of 3 games, and my Gondor army ended the weekend on 1 draw and 2 losses. But Neil, thank you for a phenomenal Game 5. Your army looked absolutely stunning. Thank you for giving me the chance to play you and get to know you and roll some dice. And as always, as with everyone else, I very much look forward to rolling dice with you sometime in the future. So now we move to the final battle of our time at GT, the climax of the event, the final game to finish the weekend out. But we were very fortunate enough to be drawn against the one, the only Damien O'Byrne, and his absolutely amazingly painted Fellowship army for the last game. So as you can see here from the photos, Damien always goes all out on any display board and any army he's going to do. It was absolutely phenomenal, the amount of work that you can see has gone into this. Absolutely gorgeous. You've got the gates of Moria on the outside where the Fellowship were, with the Watcher for the evil side as well. And on the inside you've got Balin's tomb, where all the goblins are facing down. The one dwarf yet in Moria who still draws breath. Damien, this was absolutely stunning, mate. Yeah, like, you always go so all out in everything you do for these events. I was a little bit disappointed there was no fancy dress costume. I was expecting some big things. I don't know what I was expecting, but I was expecting something suitably goblin-y. Maybe Throne of Skulls, we'll see. But as you can see, the army list here consisted of Aragorn, Strider, Gandalf the Grey, Legolas, Greenleaf, Boromir of Gondor, Frodo, and Gimli, son of Gloin. It ended up being a bit of a pseudo Amon Hen, just with added Gandalf, with added Greybeard. So we were playing Divide and Conquer, which is the scenario where you have alternating corner deployments per warband. So we ended up with, I think it was the main bulk of the Uruk-hai in the bottom right-hand corner, and one warband of Uruk-hai up in the top left, with the Fellowship in the top right-hand corner, being the filling for a little bit of a nasty Uruk-hai sandwich. It ended up being a little bit of a Fellowship sandwich. There were 3 central objectives on the board, which you score points for having more models around than your opponent. We didn't really play this scenario. It became very quickly a game of how many Uruks does it take to put the Fellowship down, / how many Uruks can the Fellowship put down. Such a shenanigan-y game, and just such a lovely chill game to end the weekend on. So Damien ran the Fellowship all the way down to the far right objective in the centre, and by the time I'd got into combat, I had no might points left on any captains. They had burnt them all on heroic marches. I didn't want the might points anyway. It's just more to keep track of. It's just, you know, it's more paperwork, it's more remembering. You know, once they're gone, they're gone. Roll the dice and see what happens. That was my mentality. But yeah, so we'd spent all our might on heroic marches just to get down, and we ended up having like the Fellowship in this little bubble here, a big block of Uruk-hai here, and then a bigger block of Uruk-hai here, sandwiched between a ruin and a house. And then the war of attrition started between the Fellowship and the Uruks. And they lasted a long time. To be fair, they lasted, I think, a lot longer than some of the members had a right to. Effectively, I know Aragorn or Whiffagorn didn't do very well. He was the first of the Fellowship to fall, as it goes. He just got ganged up on and to spend might points to try and win fights. That's draining his resources. And eventually he did get ganged up on, and he just got put down. But otherwise, the Fellowship did fairly well. I know, Damien, you weren't too optimistic about how they were going to do going in, but you carved your way through a significant amount of the Uruk-hai forces. Boromir, his horn proved infinitely useful in keeping him alive, just relying on multiple combats, of which there were many, and Boromir blowing the horn for the courage-free Uruks to fail and instantly lose the fight, and thus allowing him to very swiftly and efficiently remove their heads from their shoulders. Legolas and Gimli had their little kill count going. I don't think it went much further than Legolas's benefit. Frodo, the little whirly bird with sting that he is, he lasted a lot longer than he should have done. He killed more than his fair share of orcs for the hobbit that he is, and then decided to put on the ring and start running around being a nuisance, halving Uruk fight value, which was super fun. But yeah, I think after Aragorn went down, the rest of the Fellowship hung around for a good 5-6 turns. And this is how you deal with hero armies. You have to keep flooding into them, because as soon as you can get them to start burning through their resources, and for the most part their resources are finite, with the exception of things like Gandalf's will point and Aragorn's might point, even like Boromir, his resources are finite, but once they're gone, they're gone. And if you can weather the storm and get them to drain their resources as early as you can, then it makes them so much easier to deal with late game, because then they are relying on rolling high enough to beat you in a straight fight. A definite war of attrition between the Fellowship and the Uruks. And eventually, one fateful turn, I think we saw 3 Fellowship members drop in very quick succession. We saw Legolas, we saw Gandalf, and then we saw the whirling dervish Frodo drop. I think it was in one turn, and just leaving Gimli and poor Boromir there, left alone to try and do what they could. I took a significant amount of joy in just firing my ballista. There was not one single turn that I wasn't going to fire my ballista into combat. Come hell or high water, doesn't matter what I'm going to hit. Don't care if I hit 5 of my Uruks or manage to spear an elf in the head and send him off, back 6 inches and do a wound and maybe kill. But I wanted it to be the ballista that shot down Boromir. That was the initial intention. I wanted to recreate that from Amon Hen just a little bit more, with a little bit more force behind it, and stay vaguely thematic. But yeah, the ballista, I think, probably killed as many Uruk-hai as it did kill points worth of Fellowship. That was so much fun, because Gandalf had blinding light up as well. It was always a bit of a gamble of just like, all we need is 6 to do it, and I'm going to re-roll this because we're going to see what happens. It did score the odd direct hit. I think it was either Legolas or Gimli that took a direct hit from a ballista at one point, and it did what it did to Aragorn LSR in a previous game. But yeah, the end of the game was another win for Isengard, which put Isengard at 3-0 for the weekend. The Isengard army did win all 3 of its games. So we're thinking maybe Throne of Skulls. We're thinking a complete Isengard Legion list. I can get more siege ballistas. But yeah, I was overjoyed to play Damien on the very last game of the weekend. We've played before. We've always had such amazing games. They've always been so much fun and a right laugh, just really getting into the spirit of the game, and just throwing dice and watching the shenanigans unfold before us. Damien, thank you so much for making Game 6 a wonderful game to end the weekend on, and allowing us to go home with 6 absolutely phenomenal games firmly embedded in our memory to look back on and enjoy for a long time after this. Damien, thank you so much. Your Fellowship looked incredible, your Moria army looked incredible, and your board looked phenomenal. I very much look forward to getting to play with you again sometime soon. We don't get to play as often as I would like, but hopefully now I can start getting some independence. We'll get that chance to play again very, very soon. But thank you so much for an absolutely phenomenal Game 6. It was a genuine pleasure. So there you have it. That is a brief rundown of the 6 games we had at GT this year. I think the final score was Gondor, 2 losses and a draw, and Isengard, who maintained a significant streak of 3 wins across the weekend. We were very fortunate as well to be able to come home with some trophies and a few awards as well. We won Company of Legend with Hurin and the Citadel Guard. We were very lucky to get a nomination for Best Army as well, and it completely blew me away that I was voted Most Sporting Player, which is one that genuinely really touched me. The fact that everybody enjoyed the games that I gave them over the weekend is really like, there's no other greater feeling to it. The fact that, I mean, I know I've had great games, but to have everyone turn around and say, yeah, we really enjoyed playing the games with you as well, like, it was a genuine pleasure to play each and every one of you. It really was. Sorry, my voice is going a bit now, it's going a bit hoarse, I've been talking for too long. But no, that was absolutely mind blown, and thank you everybody, all of you who voted me as a favourite game of vote. It genuinely touched my heart, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. And you know, just as always, thank you everybody who comes to these events and makes these such an amazing weekend. Like I joke about having tournament blues afterwards, but it's a genuine thing. Like, I come home after a weekend away and we've dropped everyone back off at various, you know, places of residence, and you sit down and you think, now what? You know, and then the hobby juices are flowing, and I think, I picked up a significant chunk of Don Amroth while I'm up there for a project I'm going to try and do either for doubles or for Thronus goals or another GT. I don't know yet. So many projects I want to do, but these events do so much to keep the passion and the love for the hobby alive, and they are probably some of the things I look forward to the most in a year. Not just from the perspective of coming up to play games, but being able to come up with some new armies, come up with our usual friend crowd, have a lovely weekend away, get to see everyone again, meet some old friends, make some new friends, and just enjoy, you know, the vibe and all the good energy that's up at these events. It's genuinely one of the things I look forward to most in a year, and I cannot wait for the next one. A huge congratulations for everyone who came away with awards for first, second, third, and for everybody who got something for either the Legends painting competition on the Saturday, or who came away with glassware. I think it was first, second, third, and judge's choice for the best army. The hobby was so strong this year. I don't know how the judges are able to nominate the few people that they do, because everyone's models and everyone's armies all just look absolutely incredible. But huge congratulations to everybody who came away with an award, and you know, just huge congratulations to everybody who had a great time. And I hope everyone did have a great time. That's what these events are all about. We've got to keep the community strong, and we'll keep building this together and all be part of it together, and keep supporting each other and keep supporting and loving the game that we are all so very fond of. But yes, that'll be enough from me now. I've rabbited on for far too long, and I'm starting to sound a bit smeagly in my throat. So I will leave you for the evening now. This was our GT Roundup review. Again, we know a little bit late, and we know it was a couple of weeks ago now. Unfortunately, this is the earliest we've been able to get around to actually tackling it. But hopefully you've enjoyed watching this. Please let us know if there's anything you want us to do in future for future tournament reviews. But thank you everybody once again who made that weekend just one of the best weekends you could have up there with everyone. And the event staff as well for putting on just a wicked event, and all the work they do to make it run so smoothly and everyone to have a good time. But yes, much love to all of you, all my opponents. Thank you all so much again for 6 phenomenal games. It was genuinely lovely to see all of you, get to play all of you, and I cannot wait until we next meet on the tabletop. But until we see you in the next video, take care guys, bye bye.